Hey folks, welcome to verifiedinvesting.com. My name is Gareth Soloway, Chief Market Strategist here. Now, in today's video, we're going to deep dive into silver. Silver continues to run towards my $48 to $50 target in the near term, even though I still think it's going higher after a pullback off that level. How high could it go? Where is it going to be a good short-term, quick short trade? I'm going to give you all the details in this video based purely on technical analysis. All right, let's get into it here. Here is silver. This is the weekly, this is the monthly chart. So you can see monthly has really started to take off to the upside. Today's high was 47.82. So we're kissing the underbelly right now of that $48 to $50 target price that we talked about when we were trading below $40 not that long ago. Now, the reason why, or where do I get 48 to 50 from? I love showing this, guys. It's very simple. You basically take the range, right? So we take the range from the 1980 high to the 2011 high, and that gives us 48 to $50. Now, let's be clear. If you factor in inflation, if you factor in all the other factors, literally silver should be way, way higher. But listen, charts are charts. We can never assume anything's going to be valued on a basis of inflation or inflation adjusted. So bottom line is, where are the charts going to give us resistance? Now, if we go back to this chart, we are getting into a vertical period on that monthly, but we're likely headed up here. And I'm going to show you where I would initiate just a quick short trade, which would be literally holding for a matter of days or a couple of weeks for a pullback. I think we could get as much as 5 to 10% on this pullback. And then honestly, I would flip it back into a long trade. So what I would do is I'm going to remove this zone here. I would take the high from 1980 right here, and I would connect it to the high from 2011. That gives us an upsloping or ascending trend line that is right around just below $51. So if we were to shoot straight up into this level, you'd have to say that at least there'd be a near-term pullback on silver. All right, at least that's what probabilities would suggest. Now, where would we be talking about it could go in this bull market cycle? All right, to do that, we have a couple things. One of them that I like to do is do what we call a measured move. So if we look at the move here, right, here silver began, right? This would be the low of the beginning of this bigger move up, right? You had this little pop in the early to mid 70s, and then it consolidated, and then right here was the low until we had this big move up. So we take that distance, and what we do is we put it, let's say, to the beginning of this move. And essentially, look at that, guys. So you have this move up right here. It then pulled back. And if we extend this out, we just drag it out here. Bear with me as I do this here. We can see that it essentially gave us the exact top there. So what we're seeing is that the velocity of silver tends to seemingly, at least going back to 1980, it seems to have a maximum amount that it can go up in a vertical line, right? And again, I think one of the things we should also be doing is saying, okay, well, what time frame, right? So from this period, this was basically 49 bars, which would be, we'll call it 48. That's 4 years, right? Each bar is, we're on the monthly chart, so that's in 4 years. If we look at this one over here, it's a little bit more interesting, because if we look at this is actually 82 bars. So we're seeing the bull market cycles get longer, right? Now listen, they're more volatile, right? I mean, you can see the big drop here and the big move up to the upside. But suffice it to say is that essentially we're extending this out. And this basically brings us to, basically 7-year cycle, right? 7 years approximately on the cycle would be the last one. And so the question I would have is, number one, we have to take that same distance. So let's take the same distance, and we could either put it to here or we could put it here. I would do it to here because this was your COVID collapse, which was more panic. So really your lowest point here would start right in this vicinity, right? So we look at the low here. We had this one pop back during COVID and then it collapsed. Then this is really where the bull market started. If we do that, your upside measurement gets us a target of around just under $62. The other thing we want to do is say, okay, well, what about time frame? Like how long out would that be? And what we could do here is we can really extend this out and say, all right, well, we know that the last 2 cycles, one was 4 years and one was 7 years. So we really could continue to go up somewhere in the range all the way out into August of 2027. That would be kind of right in the middle of those levels. But ultimately, it just gives you an idea of how long these bull markets in these metals can last, which appear, at least based on the previous two cycles, to be elongating, right? So again, ultimately, I still think there's further upside in silver to about $60 to $62 per ounce during this bull market cycle. And the question then becomes, is it a bull market that only lasts the same 4 years as that first one? Now, listen, I will put this out there. There's a thought process that I partially subscribe to that says this is exactly like the 1980 bull market, right? That topped out in 1980, which was 4 years. Now, you might say, well, why? Well, because we're coming off of a very high inflationary period. You didn't have that same inflationary period in the lead up to the 2011 high, right? Think about that. That was different. We didn't have the same high inflation that we do now. And so, if anything, I would lean more towards a 4 year cycle here on silver. And that would then take us out to topping out at $60 by the end, basically by the start of September of next year. And you can see it right here, September of next year. And so what's amazing about this is we still have, I mean, listen, we've gone a long way already, but basically in 1 year, there's still another, if we do a measurement here from current levels, to achieve this target, there's still another 30% upside in silver. Now, listen, is this taking into account inflation adjusted or any of these other things? The answer is no, because we haven't seen it really behave like that. Now, if you look back in 2011 and you were like, oh, wow, we went way higher than the 1980 high, you could say, okay, well, that's because it was adjusted for inflation. We haven't seen that. And so while a lot of you guys have commented on past videos on silver, like, oh, it adjusted for inflation, it should be at $100. Partially, I agree with you, but partially I have to go with what the data is showing, which is that it's not behaving that way. Now, listen, it doesn't mean it can't continue to go up past 62, right? But in a very easy basis or just simple data analysis, this would give us, it's basically mirroring that 1980 run, which again gives us a run of the same amount over the same period of time, which gives us a target of $62 per ounce. Interesting stuff, guys. And again, listen, everything I bring to your attention, it's just things that I am thinking of. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's the only way. Please understand that. But these are ways where I'm using history to project out or forecast what could be one upside target. And I really do like that 62-ish level. That seems like a very reasonable, like low end, like worst case, silver's going here, right, to 62. Best case, maybe it's inflation adjusted and it goes to 100, right, or 100 or beyond. But again, I always like to take the more conservative path, because when we assume it's going to keep going and going and going and going and going, well, then what happens? We end up missing the top and then holding it on the pullback all the way back down when it collapses back down. And it's better to take the conservative side and at least take some off the table on those long-term positions. All right. Hope that makes sense, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will keep you posted on silver.